Hey guys, today we're in the book of Numbers, chapter 5. Now, as God is getting them ready to leave from Mount Sinai and start heading to the promised land, He's been ordering them in sections and getting them ready to move. And today we see a little bit different take on this. Not that so much that He's ordering them, but He is still getting them ready to move forward. And what is happening is, ultimately over the whole chapter, is He is removing sin that is in the camp of Israel. Okay, we've kind of read a lot about these in the book of Leviticus, but now we can see today is the day in which they are getting removed from Israel. And so we see in chapter 5, the Lord spoke to Moses. What's interesting is we see this 3 times in this chapter, verse 1, verse 5, and verse 11. So you can kind of section off Numbers 5 by verses 1, 5, and 11. And the Lord spoke and He said, what? Command the people of Israel that they are to put out the camp everyone who is leprous, who has discharge, or anyone who has had unclean contact with the dead. And we already read about this, Leviticus 13, Leviticus 15, Leviticus chapter 21. God said, if you do this, you are unclean. And today is the day where before they move into the promised land, He is removing those unclean people from the camp. It is not just because they're bad or because something is wrong, but ultimately the sin or the sickness of leprosy, touching of death, or discharge is a reminder of sin, right? It's not that they have sinned, it's a reminder of sin, a reminder that the world is not perfect, sin has come in, and that's why there are these problems. So God is saying, get rid of the sin in the camp before you move into the promised land. Verse 4 says Israel did this. Verse 5, we see the Lord spoke to Moses again, speak to all the people of Israel. And when a man or woman commits any of the sins that the people commit by breaking the faith with the Lord, you got to get rid of them, right? So if people are breaking faith with the Lord, there's a couple of things that they need to do, right? When he realizes his guilt, if he realizes he's been wrong, he has to confess his sins. That's the first thing, verse 7. He has to make full restitution. That's the second thing they has to do. And then lastly, number 3, he has to add a fifth to it. He has to pay even more. So if he's done something wrong, he has to admit to doing wrong. He has to bring restitution. He has to pay for what he has done wrong. And then also he has to go above and beyond. And so that's what happens. And then lastly, verse 11 starts with the Lord speaks to Moses. And the whole rest of this chapter is about this section. And when you're reading it, it's a weird section. I got to be honest. It's weird, right? And even if you read it, you might think that maybe it's a little sexist, right? That what's happening. But let me explain it to you and kind of let you understand why it's in there. And I think you're really going to see maybe a different side of God here in Numbers chapter 5. So basically, the rest of this chapter says, if a man thinks that his woman has had an affair on him, his wife has had an affair, but there's no proof, there's nothing that he could say, nothing that he can prove to, but he just knows that his wife has had an affair with him, then there's a process, there's a trial that must stand place. And so God gives this trial. God says, okay, you're going to take your wife to the priest, and here's what the priest is going to do. The priest is going to ask, have you done this? No, I haven't done this. And so what is the priest going to do? Well, when he goes to take his wife to the priest, he is to take a grain offering to the Lord. But this grain offering is to have no frankincense or oil in it, right? Which means it's going to be bitter. When it's burnt, it's not going to smell good, right? Because this is not a good situation, right? So it's bringing a little bitterness to the situation. And then he will tell the priest, hey, I think my wife has cheated on me. And the priest will do some things. What does he do? Well, he takes holy water, not from the Catholic Church, okay? Holy water is water that is inside of the tabernacle, right? And probably out of the basin that's there, but water that has been prayed over and has been ordained. Remember, what is clean or what is holy and what is unclean cannot touch. So when it says holy water, it just means water that was made to be used inside of the tabernacle, okay? So the priest is going to take some water that's inside the tabernacle, and he's going to collect dust off of the floor of the tabernacle, right? So holy, holy, right? He's going to take this, right? Holy, dust on the floor, and he's going to put the dust in the water. So now the priest has a grain offering of grain with no frankincense and oil, and he has a jar of water that has been made bitter by the dust and the dirt and the debris that's in there, right? And so he has these two things, and he asks this woman, have you had an affair on your husband, right? And she says, no, I haven't. And so God says, well, here's what you're going to do, right? And so he says that he will uncover her head, right? Remember, the uncoveredness of head means that she is unclean, right? And so he's going to uncover her head, and in this process, she's going to have to take an oath. She's going to have to swear to God that she has not had an affair. And this oath that she takes it's a pretty gruesome oath, right? You see this oath that is verses 20 through 22. But she takes an oath among the people, and he says a couple things. He says that she takes an oath that your thigh fall away. That means your womb fall away, right? So your womb would fall outside of you. And your body would swell. Your stomach, your stomach would swell. You would have internal rot. Okay, that's what it's talking about. May this water that brings your curse pass into your bowels. That's your stomach, your womb, and in your thigh. May your womb fall out, fall away. And so what happens here, God says, if you have had an affair and you're lying about it, when you drink this dirty water, this is what's going to happen. Your stomach's going to hurt, it's going to cause rot, your womb is going to mess up, and it's going to fall out. You're going to have external bleeding out of your womb. And then all of Israel will know that you're lying. But God says, but if you're telling the truth, nothing will happen. When you read this chapter, you think of one, that's kind of a gross situation, right? But think of what God is doing. God is removing sin from the camp, leprous, discharge, people who's touching dead people, people who are leaving the faith of God. They're doing sin and they're not making restitution for it. They're not apologizing for it. They're not confessing it. God is ultimately telling everyone to get right. We're moving to the promised land. We're moving to the place. God now lives with you. He's in the tabernacle. God is inside of Israel, inside the camp. So you must be holy. Remember, God is holy. They are not. The clean cannot touch the unclean. So God is not going to become unclean. So the unclean must become clean, right? God is saying you need to raise the bar because I'm with you. So get all the filth out because I'm with you now and we're moving towards the promised land. So get rid of the leprosy, get rid of the discharge, get rid of the liars and the stealers, the thieves, get rid of all of those people, but also get rid of the adulterers. Now, when you read this, you think, man, that is God sexist? He didn't say anything about the guy. This was all about the woman. You got to understand what's going on in Scripture and in the culture of that time. In the culture of that time, men were always right. You notice when you read it says, if there was no witnesses, if there was no proof, a man could stand up to a woman and say, she cheated on me, she adulterated, and he could kill her for good reason and it would be fine. But if she was falsely accused, there was no system in place to save that woman. God puts that system in number 5. He stands up for women. Men would falsely accuse their wives all of the time. So because he didn't like her, she was unattractive, she got fat, she wasn't producing kids, whatever the mean, he wanted to get rid of her so that he could pick up a new woman. And so God steps in and says, well, here, everybody's kind of saying all these false things. Well, here's what we're going to do. If the woman's lying, she will rot, her stomach will rot, her womb will fall out. All of Israel will know that she was lying. But if she was not lying and she's telling the truth and she takes this oath, she drinks this water and nothing happens to her, she's telling the truth and she is made righteous. She is made pure. She is made right. The man, now they know that the man is lying, right? So you have a point here where it's kind of all against the woman, but God is stepping up for the women here in Numbers chapter 5. The whole point was to get rid of sin out of the camp. If the woman is lying about adultery, get him out. If the man is lying about adultery, get him out, right? So we're removing sin from the camp. You might ask yourself, where's Jesus at in Numbers chapter 5? Well, if you know the Gospels, you know that Jesus stepped in several times for women. You remember they came and they threw him down and said, this woman's accused of adultery. And Jesus said, whoa, hold on. He who has sinned, let him cast the first stone. He stood up. He stood up from the woman. They didn't have proof that she was an adulteress. They're making it up. And so what we see in Numbers 5 is exactly what Jesus does in the New Testament. There's a proof that must be taken on. You've got to prove to me that this is happening. Oh, you don't like her. You don't want her to go. And so we see Jesus finding all kinds of compassion for the women, of saving them. People who had no voice, who had no status in a culture, God stood up for in Numbers chapter 5, as well as Jesus stood up in the Gospels. And so we can see here just the Bible coming together, old and new, all for the same point. Accusing somebody is not enough. God wants to know the heart of the person. Are they a sinner or are they not? Are they faithful and righteous or are they not? Are you fit for the promised land of God? I hope that makes more sense, and we'll see you tomorrow in Numbers chapter 6. God bless.